The message appeared at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, glowing cold and blue in the darkness of Ann Curtis's home office. She had been reviewing documents, the kind of quiet, productive work she did when Mitchell was asleep and the house belonged only to her thoughts. Outside, rain tapped against the windows in a rhythm that usually soothed her, but tonight the sound felt ominous, like fingers drumming impatiently on glass. The notification lit up her phone with that particular ping that meant the Powell family group chat, the one where she was usually silent, watching their plans unfold around her like weather she had no control over. "We've agreed you're no longer part of the family," Diane Powell had written, each word chosen with the precision of a surgeon making an incision. "Don't come to any family gatherings. This is final." Anne read it once, twice, 3 times. The words didn't change. Her vision didn't blur or swim with tears. The sentence remained stark and brutal, illuminated on the screen like an execution notice. Below Diane's message, a small thumbs-up icon appeared next to Mitchell's name. Not a comment defending her, not a question asking what was happening, not even the courtesy of cowardice in private. Just that simple digital gesture of agreement, public and permanent, where everyone could see that her husband of 15 years had sided against her without hesitation, without thought, without any recognition that he was destroying something irreplaceable. The reason was almost funny in its pettiness. If anything about this situation could be considered amusing, she had refused to co-sign another loan for Tyler, Mitchell's younger brother, whose 4th business venture was already circling the drain before it launched like a plane with no fuel. Anne had said no quietly, privately in a phone call where Tyler had called her selfish and short-sighted and hung up before she could explain that enabling his delusions wasn't kindness. It was cruelty disguised as family loyalty. Apparently, that private refusal had become a family referendum, discussed and debated in conversations she wasn't included in, and she had been voted out of the Powell family like a contestant on a reality show. Anne set her phone down on the mahogany desk, her hand steady despite the chaos roaring through her mind. From the living room, she could hear Mitchell laughing at something on the television, that easy, comfortable sound of a man whose world was exactly as he wanted it. He'd liked the message, exiling his wife, and then gone back to his show, like he'd simply responded to a meme. The casual cruelty of it was almost impressive in its completeness. She opened her laptop and pulled up the first account with the methodical calm of someone who had made a decision and would not be swayed. Car insurance for Mitchell's vehicle and his mother's sedan and his father's truck, all under her name, all set to auto-pay from her account, all running smoothly because Anne made everything run smoothly. She clicked through to cancellation. The system asked if she was sure, offering her one last chance to reconsider. She clicked yes without hesitation. A confirmation email arrived seconds later, clinical and final. Next came the mortgage on this house, the beautiful colonial, where they hosted Powell family gatherings and where Diane walked through rooms like she owned them, rearranging Anne's furniture and criticizing her decorating choices. Anne had refinanced it under her name alone after Mitchell's credit made the original loan impossible, his score destroyed by careless spending and forgotten payments. She scheduled the auto payment to stop processing. The bank would send notices, lots of them, before anything serious happened. But those notices would go to Mitchell, and he would have to deal with them himself, would have to understand for the first time what it meant to be responsible for where he lived. The streaming services came next, all 8 of them covering everyone's preferences from Mitchell's sports packages to his sister Bryn's. Reality show obsessions to his mother's cooking channels, cancelled. The family cell phone plan that included Mitchell's parents, Tyler, Bryn and her husband, and Mitchell's grandmother, who called everyone 3 times daily about nothing important, discontinued the subscription grocery delivery service that kept Diane's refrigerator stocked with organic produce and imported cheeses she claimed to need for her health, terminated. The lawn service for Gerald's house and Diane's house and the vacation property they all used without ever thanking her ended. Anne moved through the accounts with the systematic precision she brought to everything in her life, clicking through confirmations, saving receipts, documenting each cancellation with the thoroughness of someone creating evidence. Mitchell's gym membership that he claimed was essential for his mental health, but mostly used to watch attractive women on treadmills. His father's country club membership that she had gifted him, the one that made Gerald feel successful, even though he had been barely scraping by before Anne married into the family and quietly started paying his bills. Tyler's warehouse lease that she had personally guaranteed because no one else would touch his credit, effectively putting her own assets on the line for his inevitable failure. The timeshare in the mountains that the whole family used every season while she stayed home and worked, never invited to join because someone needed to keep the money flowing. Each click felt like releasing a breath she had been holding for years, like setting down heavy bags she'd carried so long her shoulders had molded around their weight. The pharmaceutical auto ship for Diane's prescriptions, the expensive ones she took for conditions that seemed to multiply whenever she needed attention. The pest control service for 3 different properties, because apparently the Powell family attracted insects, or maybe just attracted problems that needed Anne to solve them. The automatic bill pay she had set up for utilities at his parents' house after Gerald mentioned struggling with the online payment systems. A simple kindness that had somehow become a permanent obligation no one acknowledged. The software subscriptions Mitchell used for his hobbies. The premium packages he insisted he needed to pursue his passions. Though those passions changed every few months and left behind expensive recurring charges. 17 minutes. That was all it took to dismantle the invisible architecture that held the Powell family's comfortable life together. 17 minutes to erase the countless hours she had spent organizing, managing, troubleshooting, paying for everything that made their lives run smoothly, while they never once asked how it all worked or who made it possible. 17 minutes to remove herself from the machinery of their existence and watch the gears grind to a halt. Anne sat back in her chair and looked at the screen filled with cancellation confirmations, each one a small obituary for a piece of the life she'd been living. She felt neither regret nor satisfaction, just a strange lightness, like setting down a weight she had carried so long she had forgotten it wasn't part of her body, wasn't something she was born to carry. She picked up her phone and opened the family group chat again. Diane's message sat there like a judge's verdict, absolute and final. Mitchell's thumbs up glowed beside it, a tiny blue symbol of his betrayal. Anne's fingers moved across the screen, typing 6 words that would detonate in the morning like a bomb with a delayed fuse. Thanks for confirming. I'll cancel all the auto payments. She pressed send and turned off her phone, silencing whatever responses would come flooding in once they understood what she meant. In the living room, Mitchell laughed at his show, completely unaware that his entire world had just shifted beneath him, like tectonic plates rearranging themselves. Anne walked past the doorway where she could see him sprawled on the couch she had bought, in the room she had furnished, watching the television her money had purchased, eating snacks she had ordered. He didn't look up. He never looked up anymore. She had become furniture to him, useful and unnoticed, expected to simply be there, performing invisible labor that kept his life comfortable. Anne climbed the stairs to their bedroom and packed a small bag with clothes and toiletries, and the few items that meant something to her personally, things she'd bought for herself that carried no memories of trying to please the Powell family. Mitchell's snoring would start soon, that deep rumbling sound that used to feel comforting and now just felt like sharing space with a stranger who happened to know where she kept her toothbrush. She looked around the room they had shared, at the photos on the walls of Powell family gatherings, where she stood slightly apart in every image, always on the edge of the frame, like someone who might be cropped out later. At the furniture arranged to Mitchell's preferences because he had opinions, and she had learned to stop sharing hers. At the closet, where her clothes took up a quarter of the space, while his sprawled across the rest, claiming territory the way he claimed everything. This had never really been her home. It had been the place where she was allowed to live while serving the Powell family's needs, a beautiful prison she'd paid for herself. Anne carried her bag downstairs and set it by the front door, ready for an exit she should have made years ago. She wrote a note for Mitchell on the kitchen counter, brief and clear, offering no explanations he hadn't earned. "Staying at my office building. Don't call unless it's an emergency." She didn't mention the cancelled accounts. He would discover that himself soon enough, would have to face the consequences of his choices without her there to cushion the blow. As she drove through the empty streets toward the building she owned, the one none of the Powells knew about because they had never asked about her life beyond what she could give them, Anne felt something crack open inside her chest. Not her heart breaking, though there was grief in the sensation. Something else, something that had been locked away for so long she had forgotten it was there, had forgotten what it felt like to breathe without permission. Freedom. Pure and terrifying and absolutely necessary freedom. Her phone, still turned off in her purse, was probably already filling with messages. The automatic cancellation notices would be arriving in Powell family inboxes, like bills coming due. The panic would be starting, spreading through their group chat like wildfire through dry grass. By morning, they would realize exactly what "I'll cancel all the auto payments" actually meant. They would understand, perhaps for the first time, that Anne Curtis had been holding their entire world together with her own two hands, and she had just let go. Anne pulled into her private parking space and looked up at the building where she had created something entirely her own, something the Powells had never touched or diminished or taken credit for or even known existed. She grabbed her bag and walked toward the door, leaving behind the family that had just exiled her from their lives without understanding what they were exiling. They had no idea what they had just lost, but they were about to learn, were about to discover that the woman they dismissed as Mitchell's wife was actually the foundation their entire comfortable existence was built upon. And foundations, once removed, leave everything above them to collapse. Chapter 2. The Reckoning Begins. The first call came at 5:13 in the morning, piercing the quiet darkness like an alarm. Anne's phone, which she had finally turned back on after a surprisingly peaceful night's sleep in her office building's furnished apartment, lit up with Diane Powell's number flashing insistently. Anne watched it ring from her bed, counted the vibrations against her nightstand, and let it go to voicemail with a calm that surprised even her. The second call came at 5:14, then 5:15. By 5:20, there were 7 missed. Calls from various Powell family members, and the voicemail notification showed a growing list of messages that she imagined were progressively more desperate. Anne made herself coffee in the small kitchen, the expensive dark roast she preferred and never bought for the house, because Mitchell complained it was too strong, too bitter, too much like actual coffee instead of the sweet-flavored drinks he preferred. She took her time adding cream, stirring slowly, savoring the quiet morning that belonged entirely to her, with no one demanding her attention or her labor. The morning light filtered through the tall windows, painting everything in shades of gold and possibility. Only then, when her coffee was perfect and she was settled comfortably on her couch, did she press play on the voicemails. Diane's voice came first, shrill and panicked in a way that would have sent Anne scrambling to fix things just days ago. "Anne, I just got a notice that my prescription service is cancelled. There must be some mistake. Call me immediately. This is urgent." The next message, just minutes later, had shed all pretense of politeness, like a snake shedding skin. "Anne, I know you're angry, but this is childish and frankly dangerous. I need those medications. Fix this right now." Tyler's message was pure rage, his voice rising to a shout that probably woke his neighbors. "What the hell, Anne? I got locked out of my warehouse. The lease company says the guarantee was withdrawn. You're going to cost me everything I've worked for. Call me back now. Bryn's voice was tearful and confused, the way she sounded when something disrupted her carefully planned life. Anne, my flight confirmation for the reunion just disappeared. The timeshare reservation is gone too. Did something happen to your credit card? Did someone steal your identity? Mitchell won't answer his phone. Please call me back. I don't understand what's happening. Then came Gerald's voice, quieter than the others, tired in a way that made him sound older than she remembered, worn down by years of watching his family take and take. Anne, I think I understand what's happening. When you have time, I'd like to talk, just to talk. No demands, no requests, just a conversation. The other messages devolved into increasingly frantic variations of the same themes. Things were disappearing. Services were ending. The comfortable machinery of their lives was grinding to a halt, and they had finally realized who had been maintaining it all along, who had been the invisible mechanic, keeping everything running smoothly. Anne deleted the voicemails and sipped her coffee, which was still hot and perfect. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of her apartment, illuminating the space she had designed for herself, filled with colors she loved and furniture she had chosen and artwork that spoke to something in her soul. Deep blues and rich golds, textures that pleased her, shapes that made her feel peaceful. The Powells had never seen this place. They had never asked where she went or what she did with her time beyond serving their needs. They had no idea this sanctuary existed. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mitchell, the first direct contact he'd attempted. "Where are you? Your note said office, but which office? We need to talk. Mom is freaking out." Anne typed back a single sentence, each word deliberate. "I'm exactly where I said I would be." She could picture him in their kitchen, confused and irritated, probably not even dressed yet, hair sticking up the way it did in the mornings, expecting her to simply explain and fix whatever was causing all this chaos in his comfortable world. It would not occur to him that she was the chaos, that she had deliberately created this disaster, that every panicked call and cancelled service was her methodical revenge for that careless thumbs up beside his name. He still thought this was something that had happened to him, not something he had caused. Anne showered and dressed in clothes she loved, a deep emerald suit that made her dark skin glow and her presence undeniable, the kind of outfit that made people take her seriously before she even opened her mouth. She had a meeting this morning with potential partners, and she intended to walk in looking exactly like what she was. Powerful and unbothered, and completely in control of her own life. Not the diminished version of herself she'd become in the Powell family, but the full magnificent version she was without them. The drive across town took her past the house she had left behind. She didn't slow down or look at it with longing. It was just a building now, bricks and wood and dry wall that had witnessed her making herself smaller for years. A place where she used to perform the role of dutiful wife to a man who had forgotten to see her as a person with her own thoughts and dreams and needs. Mitchell called while she was parking at the meeting location. She answered this time, curious what his opening move would be, what strategy he'd chosen for this conversation. "Anne, what is going on?" His voice carried that edge of frustration he used when electronics didn't work the way he expected, that entitled irritation of someone who believed the world should conform to his convenience. "Mom has been calling me all morning. Tyler is losing his mind. Did you actually cancel everything? Like everything? "I told you I would," Anne said, her voice calm and even, giving him nothing to latch onto. "In the group chat. Right after your mother told me I was no longer family. I said I would cancel all the auto payments. I kept my word." Silence on the other end. She could hear him processing, trying to find an angle that made this her fault, her overreaction, her problem to fix. The mental gymnastics were almost audible. And come on, you know Mom was just upset about the Tyler thing. She didn't mean it. She was emotional. You know how she gets when she's stressed. She wrote it down in a group chat where everyone could see it. She told me I'm not family and not to come to any gatherings, and you liked it, Mitchell. Anne's voice remained level, but she let him hear the steel underneath, the backbone he'd never noticed she had. You liked the message that threw me out of your family. You agreed with her publicly. I didn't. It was just a reaction. I wasn't thinking about what it actually meant. Anne, we can talk about this like adults, but you can't just shut everything off. People depend on those accounts. Real people with real needs. Do. People depend on me, Anne corrected, her words precise and cutting. Past tense. I'm no longer family, remember? So I'm no longer funding the family. It's very simple. You set a boundary. I'm respecting it. This is insane. You're being vindictive. This isn't like you at all. I'm being consistent. Your mother made a boundary. I'm respecting it. That's exactly like me, actually. Following through on what people tell me they want. Another silence, longer this time, heavier with dawning comprehension. Anne could practically hear his mind racing, trying to figure out how bad this actually was, calculating what he personally would lose, how this would affect his comfortable life. How do I get coffee? Mitchell's question was so absurd, so perfectly encapsulating his self-centered worldview, that Anne almost laughed. My card declined at the coffee shop. The barista from high school, that guy Brian who always talks about his terrible band, he had to spot me the money. It was humiliating, Anne, completely humiliating. There it was. Not concerned for his mother's medications, or his brother's collapsing business, or even the mortgage on their house that would be going into default soon. His immediate worry was the personal inconvenience of a declined credit card and damaged pride in front of someone he used to know. His hierarchy of concerns revealed everything about who he was. That card was linked to my account, Anne said, each word landing like a stone in still water. You're an authorized user on my credit, Mitchell. We're an authorized user. I removed you last night. You removed, and that's my card. I've had that card for years. No, that's my credit line that you had access to. There's a significant difference. You should probably check your bank account and see what you actually have without my infrastructure supporting you. She could hear him moving, probably pulling up his banking app with hands that were starting to shake. And then the sharp intake of breath that meant he had discovered exactly how small his personal resources were, without her quietly covering everything important. The reality check was hitting him like cold water. This is everything I have. That's everything you earned and saved yourself, yes. Everything that's actually yours, not borrowed from my accounts or my credit or my planning. But the mortgage is in my name, was being paid from my account. You'll start receiving notices soon. Lots of them. They'll be very insistent about the fact that payment is due. And stop. Just stop this right now. We'll have a family meeting. We'll all sit down together and work this out like mature people. But you can't destroy everything because your feelings were hurt by one message. The casual dismissal of her feelings, the reduction of exile and betrayal to simple hurt feelings like a scraped knee or a forgotten birthday, snapped something in Anne's carefully maintained composure. Her voice, when she spoke, was sharp enough to cut. My feelings weren't hurt, Mitchell. My eyes were opened. There's a profound difference. Hurt feelings heal when someone apologizes sincerely and changes their behavior. What I saw when you liked that message was the truth about what I mean to your family. I'm useful to you all. I'm not valued, and I'm done being useful to people who don't value me as a human being. She ended the call before he could respond, before he could deploy whatever manipulation he'd been preparing, and walked into her meeting with her head high and her smile genuine. The people she was meeting saw her immediately, respected her instantly, and spent the next hour treating her like the intelligent, capable woman she was. They asked her opinion and listened to her answers and negotiated with her as an equal. It was intoxicating, being seen like this, being treated like she mattered. When she emerged from the meeting with a signed contract and excellent terms, her phone showed 32 missed calls from various pals. She turned it on silent and went about her day. Whatever chaos was unfolding in their group chat, whatever panic was spreading through their suddenly unstable lives, it was no longer her concern. Not her circus, not her monkeys, not her problem to solve, while they treated her like an inconvenience. Anne Curtis had been dismissed from the Powell family with all the ceremony of taking out trash. She was simply accepting the dismissal and removing her support. If they couldn't understand the consequences of their own decisions, that was their education to pursue on their own time. Not her problem anymore. Not her responsibility. Not her life. Chapter 3, The Empire They Never Saw, Ramona. Washington arrived at Anne's office building carrying 2 bottles of wine and wearing the expression of someone who had heard gossip so delicious she could barely contain herself. Her eyes sparkled with mischief and righteous indignation. She swept through the door of Anne's private apartment without knocking, a privilege earned through decades of friendship that had weathered everything life threw at them, and set the wine on the counter with a dramatic flourish worthy of a stage performance. "Tell me everything," Ramona demanded, already pulling wine glasses from the cabinet with the confidence of someone who knew where everything was kept. "And I mean everything, every single detail. Because I just got off the phone with my cousin who works at the pharmacy downtown, and apparently Diane Powell came in screaming about her prescription delivery being cancelled and threatened to call the mayor. The actual mayor, Anne, like he has nothing better to do than deal with her medication drama." Anne, who had been reading on the couch, still wearing her emerald suit from the morning meeting, looked up with the first genuine smile she'd felt in days. "She threatened to call the mayor. Girl," she told the pharmacy staff that this was a medical emergency and someone would be held legally responsible. They had to explain to her 3 times that the account holder had cancelled the service and they couldn't just reinstate it without authorization. She kept saying there must be fraud, that someone stole her identity, that her daughter-in-law would never do something so irresponsible. Ramona paused for dramatic effect, her hands gesturing wildly. "Then she finally called you and found out her daughter-in-law absolutely would do exactly that, and had done it with great pleasure." Anne gestured to the wine glasses in the cabinet, and Ramona poured generous amounts while talking, her hands moving expressively to punctuate each point. The wine was deep red and expensive, the kind they saved for celebrations, so let me make sure I have this completely right. The Powell family, in their infinite wisdom, decided to kick you out via group chat like you were some random person and not the woman who's been holding their world together for 15 years. Mitchell, your husband, the man who promised to love and honor you, liked the message like it was a funny meme. And you responded by cancelling every single thing you paid for, which apparently is absolutely everything they depend on. Everything they depended on, yes. Everything that made their lives comfortable and easy and functional. Ramona handed Anne a glass and raised her own in a toast, her smile fierce and proud. "You are my absolute hero. I have waited years, literal years, for you to stop letting those people treat you like an ATM with a pulse. Tell me what they're losing. Give me all the details." Anne took a sip and leaned back into the couch cushions, feeling the tension of the day finally releasing from her shoulders. "The house payment will stop processing next week. Mitchell's car insurance is gone as of midnight last night. His parents' vehicles too. The cell phone plan that covered 8 people just got discontinued. Streaming services, all 8 of them. Grocery delivery to Diane's house that she used constantly. Gerald's country club membership that made him feel important. The timeshare reservation Bryn wanted for the reunion next month. Tyler's warehouse lease guarantee, that was the only thing keeping his business operational. Lawn services for 3 properties. Diane's prescription auto ship. Utility auto pay for Mitchell's parents that kept their lights on. Should I keep going? Yes, absolutely keep going. Ramona was grinning so wide, her face had to hurt. her joy in Anne's rebellion completely unrestrained. Mitchell's gym membership that he claimed was essential for his mental health. His hobby subscriptions for things he never actually used. The pest control for multiple houses. The vacation property maintenance that kept everything running smoothly. Various insurance policies I'd quietly taken over. Charitable donations made in the Powell family name that they took credit for at church and made them look generous. Stop. Stop. I'm going to choke on this wine from laughing. Ramona set her glass down and wiped her eyes, her shoulders shaking with laughter. They really had no idea how much you were covering. Like truly no comprehension at all. Mitchell thought his salary was substantial because it covered his personal spending money. He never calculated what the household actually cost or noticed that his paychecks never touched any of the major expenses. He just assumed his job paid for everything and mine was extra, bonus money for nice things. His family just assumed there was Powell family money somewhere. Some inheritance or trust fund they all benefited from. Old money that justified their sense of superiority. But there was no Powell money. There was only my money. And my willingness to share it with people who never once asked how I earned it or what I sacrificed to build what I built. They just assumed it appeared magically, like I was some kind of prosperity fairy godmother. Ramona's expression shifted from amusement to something more serious, her eyes sharp with understanding. She set down her wine and turned to face Anne fully, giving her complete attention. How much do they actually know about what you do? Like really know, not what they assume. Mitchell knows I have a job. That's the full extent of it. He knows I go somewhere during the day and do something on a computer. Anne, come on. How is that even possible? You've been married for 15 years. Anne shrugged, a gesture that contained years of resignation and swallowed disappointment. He never asked for details beyond the surface. None of them did. I tried at first, talking about my work, sharing interesting developments, celebrating wins. Their eyes would glaze over like I was speaking a foreign language. The conversation would shift to Mitchell's job, or Tyler's latest business idea, or Bryn's children, or what color Diane was painting her guest bathroom. Eventually I stopped trying. They labeled me as having some corporate job, and that was enough for them. Some corporate job, Ramona repeated, her voice flat with disbelief and growing anger. Anne, show her. Show me what they never bothered to learn about. I want to see the empire they overlooked. Anne stood and walked to her home office, Ramona following close behind. She pulled up files on her computer, spreading documents across multiple screens like a general surveying a battlefield. Property deeds, investment portfolios, client contracts, revenue statements, evidence of success that should have been celebrated but was instead invisible. I own this building, Anne began, gesturing around them with quiet pride, and 3 others across the city. Commercial real estate that generates consistent passive income month after month. I bought the first one the year before I met Mitchell, when property values crashed and everyone else was panicking and selling. I saw opportunity where others saw disaster. 4 buildings, Ramona whistled low, her eyes wide with impressed shock. What else? I run a consulting firm, small by some standards, but extremely profitable. I advise companies on financial restructuring, efficiency improvements, strategic planning. My clients pay premium rates because I deliver results that transform their operations. I don't just give them reports they ignore. I give them actionable solutions that work. How premium are we talking? Anne pulled up a contract and showed her, letting the numbers speak for themselves. Ramona's eyes widened comically. For one consultation? That's for one project? For one project, yes. I usually handle 3 or 4 simultaneously, juggling multiple clients, while somehow also managing Mitchell's family's entire financial existence. Anne Curtis, you are telling me that while Mitchell thought you had some vague corporate job shuffling papers, you were running a consulting empire and managing multiple properties. Empire is generous. It's a successful firm with an excellent reputation in specific circles. I'm selective about clients. I only take projects that challenge me. Does he know about any of this? The buildings? The consulting? The actual scope of your income? He knows I work. He's never asked for financial details beyond checking that we could afford things he wanted. When we got married, I kept my accounts separate. He assumed it was because I was cautious, protecting myself in case the marriage failed. He never wondered why I never needed his income for anything important. Never questioned how I could cover every major expense without strain. Ramona was scrolling through the documents now, her expressions cycling between shock and fury, between pride in her friend and rage at the people who overlooked her. How much are you worth, Anne? Give me a ballpark number. I need to know. Ramona, give me a number. I'm your best friend. I deserve to know the scope of their stupidity. Anne quoted a figure that made Ramona sit down hard in the desk chair, her hand over her mouth. And Mitchell has no idea. None. Zero. He thinks you're just comfortable. Mitchell knows I'm financially stable. He doesn't know the details because he never asked. His family certainly doesn't know. When we bought the house, I told them I was using savings and a good credit score. They never questioned how much savings or what kind of income supports that credit score. They just accepted it because it benefited them. Meanwhile, they're treating you like you're the lucky one. Like you married up into the Powell family with their nice name and social connections. They have a nice last name, Anne said, her voice carefully neutral, practiced at hiding pain. And they're well connected socially in certain circles. I think they genuinely believed that was more valuable than actual money or competence or anything I brought to the table. Social capital versus financial capital, and they were sure theirs was superior. Ramona stood and paced the office, her wine forgotten, her energy needing an outlet. This is so much bigger than I thought. I figured you paid for some stuff, maybe more than your fair share, but this. And you've been funding an entire family's lifestyle while they looked down on you. While they treated you like you should be grateful, they let you sit at their table. I wouldn't say they looked down on me. Yes, you would, if you were being honest with yourself. Diane treats you like the help who should be grateful to have a job. Bryn acts like Mitchell did you a favor by marrying you, like you won some kind of lottery. Tyler calls you for money and gets angry when you dare to have boundaries about enabling his failures. And Gerald, sweet Gerald, who you think is better than the rest, let all of it happen without ever standing up for you meaningfully. Silence in the face of injustice is complicity. Anne couldn't argue because everything Ramona said was true, every word hitting its target perfectly. She sank into the other office chair and stared at her screens full of evidence of success that no Powell had ever acknowledged or celebrated or even noticed. They made me feel small, Anne said finally, the admission costing her something to speak aloud. Even though I was holding everything together, making everything possible. They made me feel like I should be grateful they accepted me into their family. Like I was getting more than I deserved by being included. Because you're black. Because I'm black. And they're white. And in their minds that old hierarchy still matters, even though they deny it vehemently if asked directly. They think they're progressive because they're not burning crosses or using slurs. They don't understand that their subtle racism is still racism. They thought they were doing me a favor, letting me into their family. They never realized I was the one doing favors over and over, until I became invisible, except when they needed something. Ramona pulled Anne into a fierce hug, holding her tight the way she had through every heartbreak and triumph of their friendship. Well, they're seeing you now, aren't they? Now that everything is falling apart and their comfortable lives are uncomfortable. They're seeing the absence of my money and my labor. I'm not sure they're seeing me yet as an actual person with feelings and needs. They will, Ramona promised with absolute certainty. When the bills come due and the services don't restart and their comfortable lives stay uncomfortable, they'll have to see you. The real you. The woman who built all this, while they took credit and called it family loyalty. Anne's phone, still on silent, lit up with another call. Mitchell again, persistent as always. She let it ring through without even considering answering. What's he been saying? Ramona asked. That I'm being vindictive, that people depend on those accounts, that we need a family meeting to work this out like adults, that I can't destroy everything because my feelings were hurt. He's treating this like I'm having an emotional breakdown instead of responding logically to being exiled. Your feelings were hurt, Ramona repeated in the same tone. Someone might say, the earth is flat when mocking conspiracy theorists. That man and his family exiled you in a group chat, and he approved it publicly without defending you at all. And he thinks your feelings were hurt. Like this is about hurt feelings instead of fundamental disrespect. In his mind, I'm overreacting to something that wasn't that serious. He probably doesn't even remember liking the message. It was just instinct, just automatic agreement with his mother, because that's what he always does. What are you going to do? Anne looked at her screens, at the evidence of everything she had built alone, while pretending to be less than she was, while diminishing herself to make them comfortable, and felt something crystallize inside her, like carbon becoming diamond under pressure. I'm going to let them figure it out themselves, she said with quiet finality. Every single thing they took for granted, they can learn to manage without me. And if they can't, if they fail and fall and struggle, that's information they should have. That's an education they desperately need. Ramona raised her wine glass again, her smile fierce and proud. To Anne Curtis, the woman who held everything together until she decided to let go and watch it all fall apart without her. They drank to that. And for the first time in 15 years, Anne felt like herself in the presence of her success, instead of diminishing it to make others comfortable or pretending she was less capable than she was. The Powells were learning a very expensive lesson about what they had lost, about what happens when you exile the foundation your entire world is built upon, and Anne was just getting started. Chapter 4. Mitchell's Pathetic Pilgrimage. Powell arrived at Anne's office building at 7 in the morning, wearing yesterday's clothes and desperation on his face like a bad cologne that everyone could smell. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair uncombed, his eyes red from lack of sleep. He approached the security desk with the entitled confidence of a man who assumed his marriage was a universal key that opened all doors, that being someone's husband granted automatic access. I'm here to see Anne Curtis, he told the security guard, a woman named Jules whom Anne had hired personally and who took her job very seriously. I'm her husband, Mitchell Powell. Jules looked at him with professional courtesy that didn't quite reach warmth, her expression neutral and unmoved by his disheveled appearance. Do you have an appointment? I'm her husband, Mitchell repeated, as if the words held magic he just needed to say louder, as if marriage was a credential that superseded building security. I don't need an appointment. Can you just call up and tell her I'm here? She'll want to see me. Mr. Powell, Ms. Curtis has a list of approved visitors. Your name was removed from that list yesterday afternoon. I cannot grant you access to the building without her explicit authorization. Mitchell's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. A slideshow of confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally comprehension. She removed me from her visitor list. At her building, she actually put in an official request to keep me out. Yes, sir. I'll need you to exit the building now. Can you at least call her? Tell her I'm here? This is important. We need to talk about what's happening with our family. Jules picked up her phone, but instead of calling Anne's office, she spoke to someone else. I need another guard at the front desk. We may have a situation developing. A situation. I'm her husband. We've been married for 15 years. This is insane. Sir, you need to lower your voice immediately and exit the building, or I will have you escorted out. Those are your only options. Mitchell stared at her, clearly trying to decide if his wounded pride was worth making a scene, if escalating would help or hurt his cause. Pride lost. He turned and walked back to the lobby entrance. But instead of leaving the building entirely, he positioned himself by the door where he could watch the elevators. Settling in like he planned to wait all day if necessary, Jules called Anne immediately. Miss Curtis, your husband is in the lobby. He's refusing to leave the building, but he's not causing a disturbance yet. Do you want me to have him removed, or would you prefer to handle this differently? Anne, who was already at her desk working despite the early hour, considered this carefully. Let him wait. He'll either leave eventually, or I'll come down when I'm ready. Either way, thank you for following protocol. Jules. Of course, Miss Curtis. I'll keep an eye on the situation. Mitchell waited for 3 hours, sitting on the lobby bench, pacing, checking his phone constantly, growing increasingly agitated. Anne could see him on the security feed if she wanted to check, but she didn't bother. She worked through emails, prepared for an afternoon call, and revised a proposal that required her full attention and expertise. Mitchell's presence in her lobby was no more significant than a package waiting to be picked up. Just another item on a list of things to deal with eventually. At 10:15, Anne finally descended in the elevator, looking professional and completely unbothered. Mitchell must have been watching because he jumped up from the bench where he'd been sitting and intercepted her before she reached the exit, moving to block her path. Anne, finally. I've been waiting for hours. I know. Security told me you were here. She kept walking toward the door, her stride confident and unhurried. He followed like a lost puppy, desperate and confused. Can we talk? Please? Really talk about what's happening. We're talking right now. Really talk. About what happened. About fixing this situation. About how we move forward. Anne pushed through the door into the parking garage, the fluorescent lights harsh and unflattering, Mitchell trailing behind her like a shadow she couldn't shake. There's nothing to fix, Mitchell. Your family made their position clear. I accepted it. Now everyone is experiencing the natural consequences of their choices. Anne, come on. Mom was upset. She said things she didn't mean. You know how she gets when she feels threatened or criticized. I do know how she gets. I've known for 15 years. And you liked her message. You agreed with it publicly where everyone could see. They reached Anne's car, a sleek vehicle he'd never noticed before because he'd never paid attention to what she drove or owned or valued. She unlocked it and put her bag in the passenger seat while he hovered nearby, struggling for words that might penetrate her calm exterior. It was just a reaction. I wasn't thinking about what it actually meant or how it would make you feel. That's the problem, Mitchell. You didn't think about what it meant. You saw your mother exile me from your family, and your first instinct, your automatic response, was to agree with her. Not to defend me, not to question her, not even to talk to me privately first. Just immediate agreement. That instinct tells me everything I need to know about where I rank in your priorities. I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry. Are you sorry you did it, or sorry it had consequences you don't like? Mitchell opened his mouth and closed it again, unable to answer honestly without damaging his case further, caught in the trap of his own selfishness. Anne pulled an envelope from her car and handed it to him, her expression unreadable. I made you something, since you seem confused about what you're apologizing for. He opened it with shaking hands, his fingers clumsy with anxiety. Inside was a document, professionally formatted and thoroughly detailed, listing 15 years of expenses. Every mortgage payment, every insurance premium, every vacation, every emergency, every routine bill, everything Anne had paid for while Mitchell assumed money simply appeared when needed. The numbers were staggering, line after line of expenditures he'd never tracked because he'd never had to think about them. The total at the bottom was more than he made in several years. Mitchell's face went pale as he read, the blood draining away as comprehension dawned. The envelope trembled in his hands like a living thing trying to escape. That's how much I've contributed to your life and your family's life over 15 years. I'm not asking for it back. That's not why I showed you. Money given freely can't be reclaimed. I wanted you to see it written down in black and white. To understand that when you liked that message exiling me, you were dismissing the woman who made your entire comfortable world possible. Anne, I didn't know. I never realized it was this much. You never asked. That's worse than not knowing. You could have asked at any time in 15 years what I did, how much I made, what I contributed to our life. You didn't because you didn't care enough to be curious. You assumed your income covered everything important, and mine was just extra, just a nice supplement to the life you were providing. That's not fair. Neither is throwing out your wife in a group chat because she won't enable your brother's certain failure. Neither is liking that message without hesitation. Neither is calling me vindictive for having boundaries. Mitchell tried to grab her hand, a desperate gesture, but Anne stepped back smoothly, maintaining her distance. Please don't touch me. He pulled his hand back like she'd burned him, like her skin had suddenly become scalding hot. Anne, I know I messed up badly. I know I should have defended you immediately. But this, shutting off everything, leaving the house, refusing to talk to me properly, it's extreme. We can work through this if you'll just come home and talk to the family like reasonable people. The family that exiled me. That family. They didn't mean it like that. They didn't mean exile. They were just upset. How did they mean it then? When your mother said I'm no longer part of the family and told me not to come to any gatherings, what other interpretation should I take from that clear statement? Mitchell was sweating now, despite the cool morning air in the parking garage, his shirt showing damp patches. He kept shifting his weight, looking around like someone might appear with the right answer written on cue cards he could read. We'll have a family meeting. We'll all sit down together like adults. Mom will apologize sincerely. Tyler will apologize. Everyone will apologize properly, and we'll figure out how to move forward together. Move forward to what? To me funding everyone again, while they treat me like an inconvenience they have to tolerate. No, to being a real family. To appreciating you properly. To making real changes in how we interact. Anne looked at him for a long moment, this man she had loved and married and built a life around, and saw only a stranger wearing familiar features. When was the last time you asked me about my dreams, Mitchell? What? My dreams, my hopes, my plans for the future beyond serving your family. When was the last time you asked me anything about my inner life that wasn't about what I could do for you or your family? Mitchell's silence was answer enough, stretching out uncomfortably. Do you even know what I do for a living, beyond some corporate job? You work in finance, business consulting, strategy. He was guessing, throwing out words that might be right, desperate to land on something. Do you know how much I make annually? And we don't talk about that stuff. It's never been important between us. You don't talk about it. I tried. You weren't interested. Do you know what buildings I own? What investments I've made? What I've built completely separate from you? His expression told her he'd had no idea she owned any buildings at all, that she had investments worth mentioning, that she was anything more than his wife with a decent job. You married me 15 years ago, and you never bothered to really know me. You knew the version of me that served your needs perfectly. The wife who paid for things and showed up when called and never complained about being overlooked. You didn't want to know about the woman who built an empire while you watched television and assumed money was magic that just happened around you. That's not true. I love you. I know you. You love the idea of me, the useful version who makes your life comfortable. But you don't know me at all. If you did, if you actually saw me as a complete person, you wouldn't have been surprised by any of this. Anne got into her car, her movements decisive. Mitchell stood in the way of her backing out, forcing her to wait, using his physical presence as leverage. What do you want from me? His voice cracked, desperation bleeding through. Tell me what to do and I'll do it. Tell me how to fix this and I'll fix it. Just tell me what you need. I want you to figure out how to live without me. That's what your mother told me to do. Stop being part of your family. So now you all get to experience what that actually means in practical terms. For how long? How long is this punishment going to last? I don't know. Maybe forever. Maybe until you all learn to value people before you need them desperately. Maybe until you understand what you lost. She gestured for him to move. He did, stumbling back against the concrete wall. And Anne drove away without looking in her rearview mirror at the man she was leaving behind. Behind her, Mitchell Powell stood in an empty parking garage, holding an envelope full of truths he'd spent 15 years avoiding. Finally understanding that his wife was gone, and it was entirely his fault, that he had destroyed something precious through casual neglect. Chapter 5. The Mother-in-Law's Miscalculation. Diane Powell believed in direct action, in confronting problems head-on without hesitation. When the pharmacy failed to resolve her prescription situation, despite her threats, and Mitchell proved completely useless at getting Anne to see reason, Diane decided to handle the problem herself with the full force of her personality. She recruited Tyler and Bryn for backup moral support, and together they drove to Anne's office building on a mission to restore order to their disrupted world and remind Anne of her place. They arrived like a small army, Diane leading the charge through the lobby doors with Tyler and Bryn flanking her like soldiers following a general into battle. Jules saw them coming and stood up from the security desk, her posture shifting from casual to alert, her hand moving subtly toward the phone. "We're here to see Anne Curtis," Diane announced without bothering with pleasantries or social niceties. "I'm her mother-in-law, this is her brother-in-law and sister-in-law. Family business, important family business. I assume you can direct us to her office immediately. Do you have an appointment?" Jules asked, already knowing the answer but following protocol perfectly. "We don't need an appointment. This is family. We're not strangers off the street. Ms. Curtis requires all visitors to be on her approved list and have appointments." "Are you on her approved list?" Diane's face flushed red, her composure cracking. "Young lady, I don't think you understand the situation here. Anne Curtis is married to my son. We are family. Now you can either direct us to her office right now, or we can find it ourselves. Ma'am, if you proceed past this desk without authorization, I will call the police immediately and have you escorted out for trespassing. Those are your only options." Tyler stepped forward, using his height to intimidate, looming over the desk. "This is ridiculous. Get Anne on the phone right now." "Stop playing these games." Jules didn't flinch or show any fear. She picked up her phone and made a call, but not to Anne. "I need backup at the front desk immediately. 3 individuals refusing to leave the premises." "Refusing to leave?" Diane's voice went shrill, echoing in the marble lobby. "We just got here. We're not refusing anything. We're demanding to see someone who has been acting completely irrational and needs to be held accountable for her actions." The elevator doors opened, and Anne stepped out, followed by a woman in an impeccable suit carrying a leather briefcase. Diane, Tyler, and Bryn turned toward them like predators spotting prey, their attention laser-focused. "Anne, finally! Tell this security person that we're family, and we need to talk to you right now." Anne regarded them with the cool detachment of someone observing strangers, her expression revealing nothing. "Jules is doing her job perfectly. You're not on my approved list, so you can't access the building. Not on your approved list. And stop this nonsense right now. We drove all the way across town to talk sense into you, and you're going to hide behind security like a coward." "I'm not hiding. I'm standing right here in front of you, and you're welcome to leave any time." The woman in the suit stepped forward smoothly, her movement practiced and professional. "I'm Felicity Thornton, Miss Curtis's attorney. Perhaps I can help clarify the situation for everyone." Diane looked at Felicity like she'd materialized from thin air, like the concept of Anne having her own attorney was incomprehensible. "Attorney? Why do you need an attorney?" "We're family." Felicity pulled a document from her briefcase with practiced efficiency, unfolding it carefully. "This is a formal cease and desist notice. Ms. Curtis has removed all financial support from the Powell family, effective immediately. You are no longer authorized on any of her accounts, properties, or services. Any attempt to access these accounts or harass Ms. Curtis about their closure will result in legal action." "Harass?" Tyler exploded, his voice rising dangerously. "She destroyed my business. My warehouse lease guarantee was the only thing keeping the doors open. She didn't just stop paying. She withdrew the guarantee entirely without warning. I'm going to lose everything I've worked for because of her vindictive behavior. Urine, the guarantee was Ms. Curtis's personal liability, Felicity explained with professional calm that contrasted sharply with Tyler's rage. She has every right to withdraw it at any time. You may want to speak with your own attorney about restructuring your business without that support. This is theft. She can't just take away things we depend on without consequences. Actually, she can. Ms. Curtis never signed any contracts obligating her to support your business indefinitely. She provided help voluntarily as a gift, and she's ending that help voluntarily. There's no legal recourse for you. Diane found her voice again, pitching it to maximum offense and moral outrage. And I need my medications. Whatever issue you have with us can be worked out rationally, but you cannot play games with someone's health. That's cruel. That's beneath you. That's dangerous. Anne finally spoke, her voice quiet and devastating in its calm. You told me I'm not part of the family. You told me not to come to any gatherings. Mitchell agreed with you publicly, so I'm respecting your boundaries. I'm not part of your family, which means I'm not responsible for your family's needs anymore. That was just words. You don't end relationships over words. Words are just words. You ended the relationship with words, Diane. You exiled me with words. I'm simply accepting what you told me and acting accordingly. Bryn, who had been silent until now, tried a softer approach, her voice gentle and pleading. Anne, please, can we just talk somewhere private? Not out here where everyone can hear. We can explain what happened and why Mom was upset. This doesn't have to be the end of everything. Anne looked at Bryn with something that might have been pity or might have been contempt. Did you defend me in that group chat? When your mother wrote that message, did you say anything at all? Bryn's silence was loud in the marble lobby, echoing in the space between them. Did you text me privately to check if I was okay? More silence, heavy and damning. Did anyone in your family at any point consider that exiling someone without warning might be hurtful and wrong? Or did you all just assume I'd accept it quietly and keep paying for everything? We didn't think, Bryn started. You didn't think about me at all. That's exactly the problem. I've been part of your family for 15 years, and not one of you knows me. Not really. You know what I can do for you, but you don't know who I am. Anne turned to walk away, and Diane made one final catastrophic miscalculation. She grabbed Anne's arm to stop her, fingers digging into fabric and flesh hard enough to leave marks. You listen to me, Diane hissed, her face close to Anne's. I don't know who you think you are, but you married into this family. That comes with responsibilities you can't just walk away from. You fix this right now, or I will make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. Anne looked down at Diane's hand on her arm, then up at Diane's face, with an expression that made Diane's blood run cold. When she spoke, her voice was soft and more frightening than any shout could be. What kind of person am I, Diane? Say it. Say what you really think. Say what you've been thinking for 15 years. Diane's mouth opened, and for a moment Anne could see the ugliness ready to spill out, the racism barely contained. But Felicity stepped between them smoothly before the words could form. Mrs. Powell, you need to remove your hand from Ms. Curtis right now. You're committing assault. Security, please document this. Jules was already recording on her phone, the camera pointed directly at them. Diane jerked her hand back like she'd touched fire. This isn't assault. Don't be dramatic. I barely touched her. Unwanted physical contact is assault. And it's been recorded. I suggest you leave now before we add trespassing charges and file a police report. Tyler grabbed his mother's arm, finally reading the room and understanding they were losing badly. Mom, we should go. This isn't helping. But Diane wasn't finished, her pride refusing to let her retreat. In 15 years, did you ever ask me about my life? My dreams? My work? Anything that wasn't about what I could give you? Diane's face went blank with genuine confusion, as if the question made no sense. I asked you once about a major project I was excited about, Anne continued, her voice gaining strength. You changed the subject to Bryn's kitchen renovation within 30 seconds. I tried to tell you about a building I purchased. You asked if I could help Tyler with his rent instead. Every conversation we ever had was about what you needed from me. You never once asked what I needed. That's what family does. They help each other. No, Diane, that's what I did. I helped. You took. And when I stopped taking your son's calls about his brother's failures, you decided I was no longer worth keeping around. So now you don't get to keep the help without keeping me. Anne walked toward the elevator, and this time no one tried to stop her, the force of her words creating a barrier they couldn't cross. Felicity remained behind, her professional smile sharp as a knife, dangerous in its politeness. The Powell family is no longer welcome in this building. Any future contact with Ms. Curtis should go through my office. Here's my card. Have a nice day. She followed Anne into the elevator, leaving Diane, Tyler, and Bryn standing in the lobby like survivors of a natural disaster, trying to understand what just hit them and how they had lost so completely. Jules approached politely but firmly. I'll need to escort you out now. They left without further protest, and as they reached the parking lot, the reality finally started to sink in like cold water seeping through their clothes. Anne wasn't coming back. She wasn't going to fix everything. She wasn't going to fold under pressure or family obligation. She was done with them in the most final way possible, and they had no idea how to function without her holding everything together. Chapter 6. The Business of Rebuilding. Anne threw herself into work with focus that bordered on ferocious, an intensity that surprised even her. Her days filled with meetings and client calls and strategic planning sessions that demanded every ounce of her attention and expertise. She took on 2 new consulting projects that other people would have considered overwhelming, impossible to juggle simultaneously. For Anne, they were liberation. Each success reminded her that she was brilliant and capable and complete without the Powells weighing her down like anchors tied to her ankles. Her team noticed the change immediately, commenting on it to each other. Anne had always been good at her work, professional and competent. But now she was extraordinary, operating at a level they'd never seen before. Ideas flowed freely from her like water from an open dam. Her presentations were sharp and compelling, persuasive in ways that made clients lean forward and take notes. People left meetings with her feeling energized and ready to implement her recommendations immediately. She was building something magnificent, from the freedom of not having to make herself smaller to fit into someone else's family. Ramona came by one evening with takeout from their favorite restaurant. Settling into Anne's office apartment like she belonged there, they ate while Anne described her newest project, hands gesturing animatedly as she explained the challenges and potential solutions, her passion for the work evident in every word. Ramona watched her friend with undisguised delight, her smile growing wider. "You're glowing," Ramona said when Anne finally paused for breath. "Like actually glowing. I don't think I've seen you this alive in years, maybe ever." Anne paused mid-sentence, considering this observation seriously. "I feel like I can breathe again, like there's space in my life for things I want instead of things other people need from me. Like I'm living for myself instead of performing for an audience that never appreciated the show." "Have you heard from any of them?" "Matinee. Mitchell calls every day like clockwork. I don't answer. Diane sent a letter to my attorney making vague threats about my reputation, implying she'll destroy me socially. Felicity sent back a very professional response that basically said, 'Try me, we'll see you in court.' What about the others? Tyler and Bryn? Tyler is threatening to sue for damages. Apparently, losing my guarantee means his warehouse operation collapsed completely within a week. He claims I deliberately sabotaged his business and owes him compensation." Anne's smile was bitter, knowing, as if his business wasn't sabotaging itself with his incompetence. And Bryn? Nothing from Bryn directly. But I heard, through a friend of a friend, that she's having marital problems. Her husband started asking questions about why her family treated me so badly, and apparently she doesn't have good answers that make her look good. Ramona raised her glass in a toast. Good, let them all sit with their choices. Let them stew in the consequences they created. They ate in comfortable silence for a moment, the kind of easy quiet that only comes with deep friendship, before Ramona spoke again. Have you thought about what happens next? After the anger fades and the dust settles and the drama calms down? I don't know if the anger will fade. I'm not sure it should. Maybe some anger is righteous and worth keeping. I'm not saying forgive them or go back. I'm asking what you want your life to look like going forward. Because right now, you're in reaction mode, responding to what they did. Eventually, you'll need to decide what you're building toward, what you're creating for yourself. Anne set down her fork and looked around her apartment, at the space she'd created that belonged entirely to her. I want to mentor young professionals who are underestimated, women especially. People who are brilliant but get overlooked because they don't fit someone's narrow idea of success or leadership. People like I was. That's beautiful. You'd be amazing at that. I want to expand my firm, take on bigger projects with larger impact, make real change in how organizations operate. I want to be so successful that anyone who ever doubted me has to choke on their doubt while watching me succeed. Ramona laughed with genuine delight. Now that's the energy I'm looking for. Revenge success is the best kind of success. And I want to stop apologizing for taking up space in the world. Stop making myself smaller so other people feel comfortable. Stop pretending I don't see the racism in how they treated me. I want to be fully myself without compromise. Say more about that part. Anne leaned back, gathering thoughts she'd been avoiding for years. The Powell family thinks they're good people, progressive, open-minded, enlightened. They married their son to a black woman, so clearly they can't have issues with race, right? But they absolutely do have issues. They absolutely do. Every time Diane introduced me to her friends, it was always, "This is Anne Mitchell's wife." Never my name first. Never my accomplishments. Just my relationship to her white son, as if that was my primary value and only identity. And the way they talked about my success, like it was surprising and unexpected, like they couldn't quite believe I managed to be competent at anything complex. The soft racism of low expectations and constant surprise. Exactly that. And I let it slide because I wanted to fit in, wanted to believe that love conquered all that mess. But the second I stopped being useful, they had no problem throwing me out without hesitation. They never saw me as equal. They saw me as lucky to be included in their white family. They were doing me a favor by letting me in. Ramona reached across and squeezed Anne's hand hard. You're well rid of them. You're so much better off without them. I know that intellectually. I just wish it didn't still hurt sometimes. They finished dinner and moved to the couch, Anne pulling up photos on her laptop from a charity event she'd attended earlier that week. Successful people she'd networked with, conversations she'd had, opportunities that were opening up now that she wasn't rushing home to play wife to a man who didn't appreciate her. Professional connections that saw her value immediately. Anne's phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. She almost ignored it out of habit, but something made her answer, some instinct that this was different. Anne. The voice was older, tired, familiar in a way that hurt. Gerald Powell. I have nothing to say to you, Anne started, but Gerald interrupted gently but firmly. I'm not calling to make excuses or ask for anything. I'm calling to apologize, really apologize, not the kind where I'm sorry you're upset. I'm sorry for what we did, what I let happen by staying silent. Anne put the phone on speaker so Ramona could hear. What you let happen? I saw how Diane treated you over the years, how they all did. I saw you make yourself smaller at family dinners, saw you swallow hurt when they dismissed you, saw you pay for everything while they acted like you should be grateful to be included. And I said nothing. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere, that you seemed fine, that marriage is complicated and not my business. But the truth is, I was a coward. I didn't want the conflict that would come from standing up for you against my wife and children. The confession hung in the air. Anne didn't rush to fill the silence, letting him sit with it. When Diane sent that message, I should have called you immediately. I should have told her she was wrong, told Mitchell he was making a terrible mistake, defended you loudly and publicly in that group chat. Instead, I said nothing, again, and now you're gone and you have every right to be. You have every right to never speak to any of us again. Why are you telling me this now, Gerald? Because you deserve to hear it, and because I'm leaving Diane. I've already moved out. Both Anne and Ramona's eyes went wide with shock. I moved out last week, took an apartment near the park downtown. I've spent 40 years watching my wife hurt people and telling myself it wasn't my responsibility to stop her. I'm done with that, done with being complicit through silence. I'm too old to keep compromising my integrity. Gerald, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything at all. I just wanted you to know that one person in that family sees you clearly now and is deeply ashamed of how we treated you. If you never speak to any of us again, I'll understand completely. But I needed to tell you that I'm sorry, truly sorry, and that you deserved so much better from all of us, and especially from my son who should have treasured you. He hung up before Anne could respond. She set the phone down slowly and looked at Ramona, who was wiping her eyes. Well, Ramona said eventually, I did not see that coming at all. Neither did I. Gerald leaving Diane? I never thought that would happen. Do you believe him? That he's really sorry? I think I do. Gerald was always different from the others, quieter, kinder in small ways. But Ramona, kindness that stays silent when cruelty happens isn't really kindness, it's cowardice dressed up nice. No argument here, but at least he recognizes that now. Anne nodded slowly, processing this development. Gerald's apology hadn't fixed anything, hadn't reversed the exile or the betrayal, but it had cracked something open inside her. The possibility that maybe one person in that family had actually seen her clearly, had understood what they lost. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something, a small opening in the wall she'd built. That same night, Mitchell saw a photo of Anne and Isaiah on social media, tagged at a restaurant downtown. His world tilted sickeningly. He realized with devastating clarity that Anne might actually move on, that she might build a life that doesn't include him, and that he would have no one to blame but himself. The photo showed Anne laughing, genuinely happy, more relaxed than he'd seen her in years. And he understood finally that he had destroyed something irreplaceable through casual neglect and entitled blindness. Chapter 7. Mitchell's transformation begins. Mitchell Powell lost his job on a Tuesday morning in a conference room that smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. The termination was technically performance-based, documented carefully by HR, but everyone in that room knew the real reason was that he'd been distracted, unfocused, making mistakes he'd never made before. His work had always been adequate. When Anne handled everything else in his life, creating the stable foundation he needed. Without her, he was drowning in responsibilities he'd never learned to manage. The severance package was modest, barely 2 months' salary. The unemployment benefits were less than his car payment. Mitchell walked out of the building carrying a box of desk items and feeling the first real fear he'd experienced since childhood. There was no safety net this time, no Anne to call who would fix everything, no family money to fall back on because that had always been an illusion propped up by his wife's income. Just him and his suddenly inadequate resources and bills that would keep coming regardless. He moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of town, the kind of place he used to drive past without seeing, where people who struggled lived. The rent was all he could afford. The furniture was whatever he could buy second-hand from online listings. He got a job washing dishes at a restaurant downtown and another job stocking shelves at a grocery store overnight. The work was exhausting and humbling and absolutely necessary. Mitchell's hands, which had only known keyboard work and casual exercise, blistered from the hot water and industrial soap at the restaurant. His back ached from lifting boxes at the grocery store. He came home from the night shift and fell into bed without showering, too tired to care about anything beyond sleep. This was the life Anne had been funding while he complained about his office being too cold or his gym not having the right equipment. This was reality without her buffer. One night, coming home from his dishwashing shift, Mitchell passed a woman arguing with her husband in a parking lot. The man kept checking his phone, clearly not listening to anything she said. Mitchell saw himself in that moment with such clarity, it stopped him in his tracks. How many times had Anne tried to talk to him while he scrolled through social media or watched television? How many conversations had he dismissed or redirected because he simply wasn't interested in what she had to say? He started therapy the next week, using money he should have saved for groceries, but deciding his mental health might be worth the sacrifice. The therapist, a patient woman named Dr. Helen Chen, asked him questions that hurt to answer honestly. When did you stop seeing Anne as a person and start seeing her as a function in your life? Mitchell wanted to argue that he'd always seen Anne as a person, but the truth crashed over him like cold water. He'd seen her as his wife, which in his mind meant a role she played in his life, rather than a complete human being, with her own needs and dreams and inner world. "Tell me about Anne's dreams," Dr. Chen prompted gently. "What does she want out of life beyond your marriage?" Mitchell opened his mouth and realized he had no idea. None. He knew she worked. He knew she was good at her job. But her actual aspirations, her personal goals beyond their marriage, he couldn't name a single specific dream. "When did you last ask her about her dreams or hopes?" "I don't remember ever asking her specifically. In 15 years of marriage, you never asked your wife about her dreams or what she hoped to accomplish." The shame was physical, settling in his chest like a stone. "I thought I knew. I thought we wanted the same things naturally." "What things?" "A nice house. A comfortable life. Maybe kids eventually. Family gatherings. The normal stuff everyone wants." "Did Anne want children?" "I assumed—" Mitchell stopped. He had no idea if Anne wanted children. They'd talked about it vaguely in the early years, the way couples do, but he'd never asked directly. Never inquired about her feelings on motherhood or how children might fit into her career or what kind of mother she wanted to be. He'd just assumed they'd figure it out later, which really meant he'd assumed she would figure it out and accommodate whatever he decided. "Mitchell, I'm going to say something difficult. Are you ready to hear it?" He nodded, bracing himself. "You didn't have a partner. You had a service provider who you occasionally had sex with. Your marriage wasn't a partnership of equals. It was you being supported by someone you took for granted completely." Mitchell wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself, but sitting in that office wearing his dishwashing uniform with blisters on his hands and humility finally breaking through his defenses, he couldn't deny it. "How do I fix it? Tell me what to do." "You might not be able to fix it. Anne has clearly moved on. But you can fix yourself. You can become the kind of man who deserves a partner instead of a service provider, whether that's with Anne or someone else in your future." Mitchell started doing the work, real work, not the performative apologizing he'd tried before. He journaled about his marriage, writing down every moment he could remember where Anne had tried to connect, and he'd dismissed her. The list was devastating. Pages and pages of missed opportunities and casual cruelty. He wrote about his family and how they'd treated her, and for the first time he allowed himself to see the racism in their behavior. The way they'd been surprised by her intelligence, The way they'd introduced her as Mitchell's wife instead of by her name and accomplishments. The way they'd expected her gratitude for being included in their white family. He wrote a letter to Anne that he didn't send, working through his thoughts on paper. Then another letter, and another. Each one an attempt to articulate how completely he'd failed her, how thoroughly he'd taken her for granted. The exercise was painful and clarifying. He began to see the architecture of his own selfishness, the way he'd built his entire life around his comfort, while Anne handled everything difficult. One evening, working his grocery store shift, Mitchell overheard two women talking in the next aisle. They were discussing a friend's divorce, and one of them said something that struck him like lightning hitting a tree. He kept saying he loved her, but he didn't even know her favorite book, didn't know what music she listened to alone in her car, didn't know what made her happy beyond what she did for him. That's not love. That's ownership. That's treating someone like a possession instead of a person. Mitchell stood frozen in the cereal aisle, holding a box of cornflakes, understanding finally what he'd lost. He didn't know Anne's favorite book, didn't know what music she loved or what she dreamed about when she couldn't sleep. He knew her body and her routines and her usefulness, but her inner life, her real self, her authentic dreams, he'd never bothered to discover any of it. That night, after both shifts, Mitchell came home to his small apartment and cried for the first time since he was a child. Not for himself, though the grief was partly selfish, but for Anne, who had spent 15 years trying to be seen by a man who looked past her every single day, who reduced her to the services she provided. He had destroyed the best thing in his life through casual neglect and entitled blindness. And now she was building something magnificent without him, which is exactly what she deserved. Mitchell looked at his phone, at Anne's contact information, and made a decision. He wouldn't call, wouldn't text, wouldn't try to insert himself into her new life with more apologies she hadn't asked for and didn't need. He would work on becoming a better man. If she ever decided to speak to him again, he wanted to be worth her time. And if she didn't, he would accept that consequence and try to be better for whoever came after. Try to actually see his next partner as a complete person from the beginning. It was the first unselfish decision he'd made about Anne in 15 years. Chapter 8. The Unexpected Complication, Isaiah. Grant walked into Anne's office on a Thursday afternoon, carrying portfolio materials and an energy that filled the room before he spoke a word. He was there to discuss a development project that needed financial restructuring, and Anne had been recommended by 3 different sources as the only consultant worth hiring for something this complex. They shook hands, and Isaiah smiled in a way that made Anne notice his smile specifically. Made her register him as more than just another client. He sat across from her desk and launched into his presentation with passion that made the technical details sound like poetry, and found herself leaning forward, engaged not just professionally but personally, watching how his hands moved when he explained complex concepts, how his eyes lit up when he talked about the potential impact of the project on the community. This neighborhood has been overlooked for decades by developers and city planners, Isaiah explained with obvious passion. Everyone sees problems and blight. I see potential and community, but I need someone who can look at the finances honestly and tell me the truth. Can this work, or am I chasing a dream that'll bankrupt me? Anne spread his documents across her desk and spent the next hour dissecting his proposal with surgical precision. Isaiah listened intently, asking smart questions that showed he understood the complexities, taking notes carefully, never once interrupting or dismissing her concerns. When she pointed out weaknesses in his plan, he thanked her for the insight, instead of getting defensive. When she suggested improvements, he got excited instead of territorial about his ideas. His ego wasn't fragile. This was what collaboration felt like between equals who respected each other. Anne had almost forgotten this feeling existed. At the end of the meeting, Isaiah gathered his materials and paused at the door, turning back. Can I ask you something personal? Anne tensed slightly, bracing herself. Here it comes, she thought. The awkward question about whether she's single, the discomfort that ruins a good professional connection. You're brilliant at this work, Isaiah said instead. Like genuinely exceptional. Has anyone ever told you that recently? Told you how good you are at what you do? Anne blinked, surprised. That's your personal question? Udom, you had this look when I thanked you for the criticism, this subtle flinch. Like you were bracing for me to argue or get offended or explain why you're wrong. I'm guessing you're used to people not appreciating your expertise. That's very perceptive. I grew up with a mother who was the smartest person in every room and spent her whole life having men explain her own work back to her like she couldn't understand it. I recognize the defensive posture. I just wanted to say, for the record, that you're extraordinary at what you do. And I hope someone in your life is telling you that regularly because you deserve to hear it. He left before Anne could respond, before she could process what he'd just said. She sat at her desk, staring at the door he'd just walked through, feeling something shift inside her chest. Not attraction, not yet, but recognition. The acknowledgement of being seen clearly, of being valued for her actual skills. Ramona called that evening, and Anne told her about the meeting with careful casualness. Ramona's response was immediate and enthusiastic, practically shouting through the phone. Coffee, you need to have coffee with this man. At minimum, a coffee date. He's a potential client, Ramona. Professional boundaries exist. He's a man who sees you clearly and appreciates what he sees without being threatened by your competence. That's rare. That's precious. Don't let professional boundaries stop you from exploring whether there's something worth exploring. I'm technically still married. You're technically separated from a man who threw you out via text message and agreed with his family exiling you. Those technicalities don't require you to stop living your life or exploring new possibilities. Anne promised to think about it, which they both knew meant she would, meant she was already thinking about it. She found herself looking forward to the next meeting with Isaiah, which happened sooner than expected when he called to discuss implementing her recommendations. They met at a coffee shop this time, neutral territory away from either of their offices. Isaiah arrived with questions that showed he'd studied her proposal thoroughly and taken her advice seriously. They talked for 2 hours, the conversation flowing easily from technical details to personal stories. Isaiah asked about her background, her education, how she got into consulting. He listened to her answers like they mattered, like he was genuinely interested in her journey. Can I be honest about something? Isaiah said as they were preparing to leave. Please. When I was researching consultants, someone warned me about you. Said you were difficult to work with, very demanding, not worth the hassle or the premium fees. Anne's stomach dropped. Let me guess. The source was connected to the Powell family in some way. How did you know? Because I recently stopped funding my husband's family, and they're trying to damage my reputation as revenge. It's petty and desperate. Isaiah studied her face carefully. That must be difficult to deal with. It's clarifying. I'm learning who my real allies are, and who was only friendly because of what I could do for them. For what it's worth, that warning made me more interested in working with you, not less. Someone that's afraid of your standards is probably someone whose work can't handle scrutiny. I figured anyone with enemies like that must be doing something right. They parted with plans for another meeting, and Anne drove home, feeling something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not hope that Isaiah would become anything romantic necessarily, though the possibility was there, shimmering on the horizon. But hope that there were people in the world who would see her clearly and value what they saw, who wouldn't be threatened by her competence. When she got home, there was a package waiting outside her door. Heavy, wrapped in brown paper, no return address. Anne brought it inside carefully and opened it to find a leather-bound journal and an envelope. The letter inside was from Gerald. She recognized his handwriting from years of birthday cards and Christmas notes. Dear Anne, it began. I've been documenting something I should have documented years ago. Every time you helped this family, every crisis you solved, every generous thing you did that we took for granted and never acknowledged. I want you to have this record, not as a guilt trip, but as proof that someone noticed. Someone saw you being extraordinary, while we all acted like it was ordinary and expected. You deserve to be celebrated. I'm sorry we failed you so completely. Anne opened the journal with shaking hands. Page after page of entries in Gerald's careful script. Dates and details of moments she'd half forgotten. The time she drove through a dangerous storm to bring Diane medication when she was sick. The time she negotiated a payment plan for Tyler's debts so he wouldn't face legal action. The time she spent an entire weekend helping Bryn move while Mitchell was away on a trip with friends having fun. The time she covered the down payment on Gerald's medical procedure when his insurance denied the claim. On and on, years of care and sacrifice documented by the one person who had been paying attention while everyone else took her for granted. Anne read through tears, recognizing her own goodness reflected back at her through Gerald's words. She had been kind. She had been generous. She had loved them in ways they never acknowledged or appreciated or even noticed. The journal ended with a note. "You are remarkable, Anne Curtis. I'm sorry I never said that while you were still part of our family. You deserved better from all of us, and especially from my son, who should have treasured you. I hope whoever you become after us appreciates you the way we should have. With genuine respect and deep regret, Gerald." Anne set the journal down and let herself cry. Not sad tears exactly. Something more complicated. Grief for what could have been if the Powells had valued her from the beginning. Relief that at least one of them recognized what they'd lost. And underneath it all, a growing certainty that she was going to be fine. Better than fine. She was going to be magnificent. Chapter 9. The sister's confession. Bryn Powell knocked on Anne's office door on a Wednesday morning without warning or appointment. Jules called up from security, her tone questioning. "Miss Curtis, Mitchell's sister is here. She says she needs to speak with you urgently." "Should I send her away?" Anne considered this carefully. She could absolutely refuse to see Bryn, could maintain her boundaries and her distance without guilt. But curiosity won. "Send her up. I'll give her 15 minutes. Bryn entered the office looking smaller than Anne remembered, like someone had deflated her usual confidence completely. She wore casual clothes instead of her typical carefully curated outfits. No makeup hiding her exhaustion, hair pulled back simply. She looked like someone who had stopped caring about appearances because bigger things were breaking inside her. "Thank you for seeing me," Bryn said, staying near the door like she might need to run. Like she was ready to be thrown out. "I know I don't deserve your time. You have 15 minutes. What do you want?" Bryn moved to the chair across from Anne's desk, but didn't sit. She stood there gripping the back of the chair like it was the only thing keeping her upright, her knuckles white. "My marriage is falling apart." "I'm sorry to hear that. It's falling apart because of you, because of what we did to you, and how Derek is forcing me to face it." Anne raised an eyebrow. "I didn't do anything to your marriage, Bryn. No, but what happened with you made Derek start asking questions I couldn't answer. Why did we treat you that way? Why did we let Mom exile you? Why was I okay with my family using you for years? And I didn't have good answers. I tried to explain that it was complicated, that family dynamics are messy, that you were being dramatic about the whole thing. Derek wasn't buying any of it. Smart man. You married someone with integrity. He made me look at it from your perspective. Asked me how I would feel if his family treated me the way we treated you. If they only called when they needed money. If they never asked about my life. If they threw me out in a group chat and he agreed with them publicly." Bryn's voice cracked. "When I really thought about it, really looked at what we did, I couldn't defend it. I couldn't defend myself or make excuses that made me look good. Why are you here, Bryn? What do you want from me?" "To tell you the truth. The ugly truth I haven't wanted to admit to myself." Bryn finally sat down, collapsing into the chair like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. "I was jealous of you, jealous of me. Eddie, you were everything I wasn't. Successful without family help, self-made, confident, genuinely smart instead of just educated. You didn't need anyone to take care of you. You took care of everyone else. And you did it while being black in a white family, dealing with all our unexamined racism, never complaining, just succeeding anyway. Anne's expression hardened. Say more about that. Mom would make these comments. Little things. Surprised you were so articulate when you spoke. Surprised you dressed so well and understood fine dining. Surprised you knew about classical music or wine or whatever cultural marker she thought belonged exclusively to white people. And I never called her on it. I let her be racist because it made me feel superior to you in some twisted way. That's honest, at least. I liked having you to look down on. It's disgusting, but it's true. You were more successful than me. Objectively better at almost everything, but you were black. So in Mom's worldview and in mine, that made you lesser somehow. We could take your money and your help and still feel like you should be grateful we included you. Like you married up by joining our family. And silence was louder than words, heavy with judgment. And the worst part is, I knew better. I knew what we were doing was wrong, but it was easier to go along than to stand up for you. Easier to let you be the family ATM than to acknowledge you as an equal. Easier to benefit from your generosity than to examine why we felt entitled to it. What do you want from me, Bryn? Absolution? Permission to stop feeling guilty so you can move on. I want you to know that I see it now. I see what we did and how ugly it was. I see my own ugliness reflected back at me. And I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. Not because I want something from you, but because you deserved to hear someone say it honestly. Anne stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below, taking her time before responding. Your apology doesn't fix anything. I know. It doesn't. Erase 15 years of being treated like I should be grateful for, scraps of acknowledgement from your family. No. It doesn't undo the fact that when your mother threw me out, you said nothing. You just watched it happen. I know. Bryn's voice was thick with tears. I know it doesn't fix anything. I'm not here asking for forgiveness or reconciliation. I'm here because you deserve to hear someone in that family admit the truth. We were racist. We were classist. We used you. And I was complicit in all of it. Anne turned from the window. Do you know what the hardest part was? Not the money I spent. Not even the lack of appreciation. It was the loneliness. Being in a family but never really belonging. Watching all of you connect with each other while treating me like a useful stranger. I was so lonely in that family, Bryn, and none of you noticed or cared. I'm sorry. Sorry isn't enough. But I appreciate you saying it honestly. They sat in heavy silence for a long moment. Finally, Bryn stood to leave. One more thing, Anne said. Nah, what do you want from the family now? After everything? Bryn's laugh was bitter. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Why does that matter to me? Because being cut off financially hurt. But what's worse is realizing you're irrelevant. That the family I propped up and supported and enabled doesn't actually need me if I'm not giving them things. That hurts worse than any amount of money. Bryn nodded slowly, understanding in her eyes. We made you feel irrelevant for years. Now we get to know how that feels. Yes, it's a terrible feeling. Yes, it is. Bryn left without asking for anything else, and watched her go, and felt something small crack open inside her. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement. One person in that family had finally told the truth about what they'd done and why. It was more than she'd expected, less than she deserved, but something. That afternoon, Anne got a delivery from Felicity, a letter from Mitchell, handwritten on simple paper. Felicity had screened it first, making sure it contained no manipulation or demands. She forwarded it with a note. This one seems different. You call whether to read it. Anne opened the letter slowly, carefully. Dear Anne, it began. I'm not asking for anything. Not forgiveness, not a response, not another chance. I just need you to know that I finally understand what I did. Not what I did in one moment by liking that message. What I did over 15 years by never really seeing you. I've been working 2 jobs and doing therapy and trying to become someone who could have deserved you. I know it's too late for us. I know you're building something extraordinary without me. I know someone else will appreciate you the way I never did. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see you now. And I'm sorry it took losing you for me to learn how to actually look. Whatever life you build next, I hope it's magnificent. You deserve magnificent, Mitchell. Anne read it twice, then folded it carefully and put it in her desk drawer. Not to save for sentimental reasons, but as evidence. Evidence that growth was possible, even for people who seemed hopeless. Evidence that she hadn't been crazy or demanding or difficult. She had simply required basic respect and acknowledgement, and it had taken exile for them to understand how reasonable those requirements were. She didn't respond to the letter, didn't call or text or reach out, but she felt something inside her shift, some tight knot of anger loosening just slightly. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but the tiniest opening toward the possibility that one day, maybe, the rage would fade into simple indifference. One day. Not today. Today she had work to do, a life to build, and her own magnificent future to create without them. Chapter 10. The Reckoning and the Choice. The invitation came from Gerald, simple and handwritten on good stationery. Small gathering at my new place. Just family who are ready to be honest. I'd understand if you don't come, but I hope you will. There are things that need to be said, and they should be said to your face, with honesty. Anne almost threw it away immediately. She'd built a beautiful life in the months since she'd walked away from the Powells. Her firm was thriving beyond expectations, bringing in clients she'd only dreamed of working with. She'd taken on projects that challenged her and left her energized instead of drained. She'd mentored 3 young professionals who were already making waves in their fields, who reminded her why she loved this work. And Isaiah had become something tentative and promising, a relationship that was taking its time unfolding because they were both smart enough to go slow and build something real. But Ramona convinced her to go. Closure isn't for them, it's for you. Go listen to what they have to say, then walk out and never look back. But at least you'll know you heard them out. Gerald's apartment was small and neat, the home of a man learning to take care of himself. He opened the door and his face lit with genuine warmth. Thank you for coming. I didn't think you would. I almost didn't. Inside, Anne found Mitchell standing awkwardly by the window, looking thinner and older and humbler than she remembered. He met her eyes briefly, then looked away, not with shame but with respect for her space. Bryn sat on the couch with her husband Derek, who nodded at Anne with something like approval. Tyler was notably absent. Tyler's not here, Gerald confirmed. He's still angry, still blaming everyone but himself for his problems. He's not ready for this conversation. And Diane? Also not here. We're divorced now. She's living with her sister, still convinced everyone else is the problem. Gerald gestured to a seat. Please sit. Can I get you anything? Anne sat but kept her coat on, a clear signal she wasn't staying long. You said things needed to be said. Gerald settled into a chair across from her. I'll start. Anne, I apologize on behalf of a family that used you, dismissed you, and then threw you away when you dared to have boundaries. We took advantage of your kindness and called it family obligation. We benefited from your success while never acknowledging it. We let racism and entitlement poison how we treated you. And when you finally stood up for yourself, we had the audacity to be offended. You deserve so much better. I'm sorry I didn't say this before you left, and I'm sorry my apology comes too late to matter. Bryn spoke next, her voice steady. I was jealous of you and hid that jealousy behind casual racism. I let my mother treat you terribly because it made me feel superior. I took your generosity for granted and never once asked what you needed. I'm ashamed of who I was in that family, and I'm working on being better. Not for you, but because I don't want to be that person anymore, Derek added quietly. I didn't know you well. But I watched what happened after, and I'm sorry I wasn't more aware when it was happening. You didn't deserve any of it." Finally, Mitchell stood. He looked at Anne with eyes that had learned to actually see. "Everything they said is true, and it's still not enough. I married you and then spent 15 years treating you like background furniture. I never asked about your dreams, your fears, your hopes for the future. I didn't know your favorite book or your favorite song or what you thought about when you couldn't sleep. I knew what you could do for me, but I never bothered to know who you were. When my mother threw you out, I agreed, because it was easier than standing up for you. I chose comfort over you. I chose my family's approval over defending my wife." Anne listened to all of it, her face giving nothing away. When they finished, silence filled the room. They were waiting for her to speak, to forgive, to release them from their guilt. She felt the weight of their expectation. "I forgive you," Anne said finally, and watched their faces light with relief. "But not for your sake, for mine. I forgive you so I can stop carrying your failures around. I forgive you so I can move forward without bitterness poisoning my new life." The relief on their faces dimmed as they realized this wasn't the reconciliation they'd hoped for. "Mitchell, your transformation is real and I'm glad you're growing, but you're becoming the man you should have been when we met. I don't have another 15 years to wait. I hope you treat your next partner better." Mitchell nodded, accepting this. Anne turned to Bryn. "Your honesty was brave. Keep examining your prejudices, but do it for yourself." "I will," Bryn promised. "Gerald, your apology meant something because it was specific and honest. But silence in the face of cruelty is its own cruelty. I will remember that." Anne stood. "I'm not coming back to this family. You were my family by marriage, but you never treated me like family. So now I'm choosing my own family." "That's fair," Gerald said quietly. "I hope you all find happiness. But I hope all of that from a distance." Anne walked to the door, then paused and turned back. "Thank you for the journal, Gerald. And Mitchell, your letter was the apology I needed. Not to come back, but to know I wasn't crazy." She left them standing in Gerald's small apartment and walked out into the cool evening air, feeling lighter than she had in years. Anne drove to her office building and went up to her apartment. She called Ramona first, then Isaiah. "How did it go?" Isaiah asked. "It went exactly how it needed to. They apologized. I forgave them. And then I left. Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay. I'm free." Anne looked around her apartment, at the life she'd built entirely on her own terms. The Powells had taught her something valuable. They taught her that she didn't need to make herself smaller, that her worth wasn't measured by what she could give, that being seen clearly and valued honestly was the bare minimum. Anne Curtis pulled out her laptop and started working on her next project. The woman who had held everything together for people who never appreciated her had finally learned to hold only what mattered: herself, her dreams, her magnificent future, and she was never letting go again.